very commonly asked question is question number 2. It might look very simple. It is, but it is also very commonly asked for the exam. And if you recollect, and as far as I can remember, for most of the attempts, you have at least 2 or 3 questions exactly the same format. They'll give you ground speed, distance, they'll ask you to find time. They'll give you ground speed, time, and ask you to find distance, and so on and so forth. Speed, distance, time, basic equation. I'm not really going to dwell more on this particular question. All right, so just very quickly go through it. So you have ground speed given as 240 knots, distance is 530 nautical miles. What is the time to go? Now, we have taken a detailed session on what a knot is and how the term knot came into existence, what is nautical miles, all those things. So basically, ships, the sailors earlier in olden days, they kind of used to have these big threads with knots, and knot to knot distance actually was counted as 1 knot, and they just throw it out and they kind of count it as a ship kind of sailed forward. All right, perfect. Not really going into deep there. Let's find out the ground speed is given as 240 knots, distance is 530 nautical miles. What is the time to go? You need to travel a distance of 530 nautical miles. Say for example from point A to point B, it is 530 nautical miles. Now the ground speed at which the aircraft is flying is 240 knots. What is the time to go? Now it's quite easy here. You look at this ground speed, it's 240 knots, and that simply means that the aircraft is going to fly 240 nautical miles per hour, and that's what is called as knots. So having said that, if I want to fly 530 nautical miles, it's more or less like more than double the distance of 240 nautical miles which it's traveling per hour, right? So the answer is definitely going to be more than 2 hours, and that kind of completely eliminates options alpha and options brow instantly, because it's kind of less than 30 minutes. Now there is a clash between C and D. You can see it's pretty close, and therefore you really need to be very accurate with your calculations, right? So let's look at the and for such kind of questions you need to use your scientific calculator. Very integral part of your navigation exam, especially when you have questions of these sorts, and particularly with questions dealing with trig functions, trigonometric functions. All right, perfect. Let's find out. Now these kind of questions dwell around the basic 3-factor equation, which is speed equals distance divided by time. Now, I'm very particular about this particular equation. Any equation which has 3 different elements is super important. They form kind of the very basic equation, right? So speed is equal to distance by time. If you have that particular equation in mind, they can ask you any out of these to find out, and you will never go wrong. So if you're at any point of time, equations in relative velocity, in departure, and lot more as well, in any of those cases, make sure that you have the basic equation written down straight next to your paper, and you can then kind of modify or improvise it as required. So I'm required to find out time here, and it is pretty clear that time is equal to distance in nautical miles by speed in knots, and by speed it's the ground speed. Perfect. So distance is 530 nautical miles divided by speed is 240 knots. You can use your basic scientific calculator without memory. The one that I am using is the Casio's FX82 Mike Sierra, which is kind of acceptable. There's no much of a havoc around this particular calculator. 530 divided by 240 is going to give you 2.208 and a couple of decimals after that, so many hours. Now it's very common for students, especially those who are kind of out of their school, and even for people who are kind of out of their college, like maybe like 5 years back, and kind of trying to reciprocate all those things from their memory. It is very common for them to write this as 2 hours and 2 minutes. Now it might find very funny and silly, but trust me, I have corrected a lot more number of students that you can actually imagine, who kind of write 2 hours 2 minutes as 2.2 hours, or 2.2 hours as 2 hours 2 minutes. So I'll give you a very classic example here, because I really confronted this with recently. One of my students came up with this particular workout on our book, which says that 2 hours 30 minutes is like 2.3 hours. It's very common to write this. This is a big mistake, right? Your answers can actually vary different by good number. I'm just trying to add on a bit more to this question. Having said that, Take this example here, 2 hours 45 minutes. It's 2.75 hours, right? Now I had a student who wrote it as 2.45 hours. You cannot blame her because the basics is kind of shaky. At the same time, you've forgotten things. That's 2.45 is not 2 hours 45 minutes. It's 2.75, which is 2 hours 45 minutes. It's completely wrong. It's more like 2.75 hours. Now this can significantly change your answer, especially with the options. If you look up in this question, which is pretty much close, 2 hours 5 minutes, 2 hours 12 minutes, we might really end up in trouble. All right, perfect. 2.2 hours is 2 hours 12 minutes and 30 seconds. As I said, this is not really necessary. You can really find out this from 2.2 hours. It's 2 hours and 0.2 into 60, which is 12 minutes. So the answer is delta, 2 hours and 12 minutes. Perfect. Let's now dive into the next question. I'm kind of giving you some tips here and there as I remember it through, because I found this as common mistakes what my students do make.